Welcome back. It is time now for our political roundtable. And joining us today, Republican analyst Ginny Buckingham and Democratic analyst Mary Ann Marsh. Let's start with your reaction to the state auditor, Ginny.
She's the best thing that's happened to the Republican Party in this state in many, many years. She's going after the Democratic governor, the Democratic attorney general, handing a playbook to the Republican candidates running against Maura Healey. Thank you, Auditor.
Mary Ann?
Well, the auditor's been making her case in the court of public opinion for well over a year now. This is going to end up in a court of law. The sooner that happens, probably the better for everyone. But the separation of powers is nothing to laugh at. It is the foundation of our Constitution, our democracy, the rule of law. And we're living right now under a country where that separation is not honored.
Next item, the U.S. Supreme Court has struck down President Trump's sweeping tariffs. The decision centers on tariffs that he unilaterally imposed under an emergency powers law, including sweeping reciprocal tariffs. The issue has been crucial to his economic agenda. How big of a blow is this? Mary Ann, let me start with you.
Speaking of audits, we should audit the tariffs. I mean, it's a huge blow to Donald Trump because, first of all, every American is paid at least $1,700 extra this year because of tariffs. It has tanked our economy. Donald Trump, it took him a year to create the jobs that Joe Biden did in a month. And and speaking of separation of powers, it's illegal. So who knows where all that money? It is tens of billions of dollars, and it probably went in his pocket.
Ginny?
Look, he tried to take a shortcut by declaring it an emergency that we had to put all these tariffs on, and then he was taking them back and putting them back on. And it was really a disaster for our economy. And so in a weird way, this might actually help him because by taking them off the table, the economy might respond well to that.
All right. Senator Ed Markey says he plans to boycott President Trump's State of the Union address. Instead, he'll join a counter program dubbed the People's State of the Union. What political message does this send, and is it the right one, Mary Ann?
It is. We're long past the point where Donald Trump should be treated like a normal president. He is not. He spends every day trying to destroy our democracy and destroy our country. Everybody knows that if you actually sit there like a normal State of the Union, you're justifying that. You're normalizing that. You're saying what he's doing is okay. So if you're going outside and doing a separate State of the Union, I'm fine with that. If you're choosing to sit in there and do that, I'm fine with that. But we are long past the day where Donald Trump should have an audience for his lies and his propaganda.
What do you make of the counter-programming end of this?
I mean, I don't think it matters that much, but for Democrats who always are so upset about the norms that have been disrupted, to then disrupt the norms themselves is a little bit hypocritical. I think sitting there and protesting in your own way, bringing a guest that sends a message that's against what the president is saying can be very effective.
But we're well past that. I mean, that I think that's the real point.
But do we
here.
stand for the norms or not?
And when the Democrats are back in office, they will restore the norms and do it. And we'll see what the Republicans do then.
I'm just enjoying the tennis match, so it's good. Several governors are pulling out of their annual meeting at the White House after President Trump declined to invite two Democratic governors. Governor Maura Healey is among those who will not attend. She did issue a statement that says, in part, the president has made this whole thing a farce. He doesn't want to work together. He's afraid to hear the truth. Do you think that the president really cares if they go or they don't go, Ginny? Does he really care?
I think it's too bad, first of all. I've been to so many NGA meetings from my time working for governors. In fact, I remember one where Bill Weld made a great deal with Bill Clinton about welfare reform because they were on the same page back in those days. So it's a bipartisan entity that really should be supported. Kudos to Governor of Oklahoma, Kevin Stitt, who has stood up to Donald Trump, and he is no moderate. Kevin Stitt's a very conservative guy, and he's doing the right thing as chair of the NGA.
Marianne?
Everybody should go or nobody should go. And I just want to remind everybody that last year, Donald Trump used that meeting to go after Janet Mills on transgendered athletes. And she said, I'll see you in court. And she won. So it's one more destructive propaganda play by Donald Trump, which has to end, and it will soon.
All right, the New Hampshire governor race is getting a little more crowded. Republican Governor Kelly Ayotte hasn't formally announced her re-election bid, but she is expected to run again. She's being challenged by Democrats Cindy Warmington and John Hyper. Now, Portsmouth Mayor Deaglan McInerney has indicated he may also run. Is Governor Ayotte in trouble here?
I don't think so. The Cook Political Report has her solid as the Republican governor. New Hampshire has a history, as we used to, of having a governor that was different from the party in the legislature. They like Republican governors. She's done a decent job of holding the line.
What do you think, Marianne?
Kelly Ayotte has a problem, and his name is Donald Trump. That ice facility they're trying to put in Merrimack, which is owned by a donor of hers, is
That's
political
gonna be a problem
poison.
for her, you
It
think?
is a big, first of all, she's lying about it. Okay, she's trying to cover up, say, I didn't know, number one. Number two, Donald Trump has never won a general election in New Hampshire. Number three, his unfavorability rating in New Hampshire is 55%. So in a year where there's going to be a huge blue wave, that could be the end of Kelly Ayotte.
Let's talk about the World Cup. World Cup funding has been a struggle. Foxborough, which will be the host city, the host town, is holding a crucial licensing until it receives millions in event security funding up front. The governor got half of what she asked for from the legislature. She had this to say last week. Listen.
You know, I'm confident that working together we can sort all this stuff out.
I think the federal money will come through at this point.
I sure hope so. It's been promised to us.
What do you make of the whole situation, Ginny?
Makes me so grateful that we never pursued the Olympics, if you
Oh,
remember
man.
that from many years
you,
ago, because
right?
can you imagine what a disaster that would have
Right.
been? It's embarrassing we don't have this nailed down now. If I were the governor, I would put the money up and say, I'm going to get it back from the feds, but enough of this.
We're
We have
just
to
a few
move
months
forward.
out.
We're just a few months out.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's having Olympic PTSD over this, and it has the same feel to it, but the reality is it's too big to fail, right?
Right.
And it's too late to fail, so
Right.
it can't
Right.
fail, but it could, and we need to do hard things here, and getting the money is certainly part of it, but the fact that only France has decided to train here and stay at the Ritz, by the way, tells you everything about what we're staring at right now.
And stay at the Ritz.
I'm just saying.
That's interesting. Our conversation continues after the break. Stay with us.